Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Kumaresan from Salesforce Developer Group Trichy. Hope you guys are doing good in this pandemic situation. So far, we are using Apex for backend related stuff, right? Now, Salesforce provides a way to solve our business problem using JavaScript, TypeScript, and Java with the help of Salesforce function. Today, Sindhu Bharti and Kanika are going to handle the entire session. The team have around 4 years of experience in Salesforce ecosystem, worked on various products like sales, service, and experience cloud. In this session, we're gonna see what is Salesforce function and how it works with some demo. End of the session, we will have Q&A, so we can collaborate and if you have any question. Also plan to conduct quiz. The first place winner will receive the certification voucher. Okay, so you can use for your certification for $200 or $400. I think it's a time to start. I would like to welcome Sindhu Bharti to kickstart the session. Hi, Sindhu Bharti.
Thank you. Hi, team. So good evening, all. So today we'll be exploring Salesforce function, my session. Next slide, please, Camilla. Yeah, so I'm working as a senior software engineer in MST Solution. I'm having 4.5 years of experience in Salesforce. So I explored various techniques like Apex, web components, Aura components, and I'm currently exploring Salesforce functions.
Hi everyone, this is Kanika Natarajan from MST Solutions. I have experience totally in 6+, and I have Salesforce experience 3+. I worked on Apex, LWC, Aura components, currently exploring Salesforce functions. Thank you.
So this is today's agenda. So we will be knowing what is Salesforce functions, what are all the prerequisites which we need to create Salesforce functions, and what are all the steps we need to follow while we are creating and invoking Salesforce functions using VS Code. A quick demo for the same, followed by the best practices which we need to follow, and then we'll be having a Q&A and quiz. Next slide, please.
It's chapter. Give me a second. Apologies to.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, why we are going for Salesforce function? What is the necessity? Because in Salesforce we have used Apex functions, and then we have web components. Likewise, different technologies. So now, why there is a sudden necessity for diving into Salesforce functions? So the main usage of Salesforce function is in any industry standard languages like Java. This being built up using by the process of authorizing the Salesforce or using our IDE or VS Code, for instance. So the main advantage of using Salesforce function is we have the option to code using any of the known programming languages like Java or JavaScript or TypeScript without restricting with the Apex standards. And also Here it is executed within the Salesforce boundary, whereas it is not limited with the Salesforce governor limits. So initially at the time of introducing Salesforce functions, so Salesforce initially wanted to raise the case and then provided set of permissions to be enabled to use the Salesforce functions. But from winter 22 release, Salesforce functions have been moved to GA. It is generally available for all sandboxes and production apps. Next slide, please. So this is the architecture, how the Salesforce functions extend the Salesforce platform. So we can create code and run the functions in local IDE. So for instance, we are using VS Code as our local IDE. So all these functionality will be comprised within the functions space. So all our existing Salesforce logics like the Apex methods or the automation process which we have will be using the, it will be executed in our Salesforce org. So using Salesforce functions, we can just communicate to our Salesforce org. So these functions can be invoked from the Apex code within the Salesforce. The communication takes place via sending a request and getting the response. For example, if I'm invoking a function from Apex code, so from Apex code, a request will be sent to the Salesforce function, and the code after executed in the Salesforce function, the response will be, that is the output of that function will be given as a response to the Apex code. Similar way, Salesforce functions can be invoked from Flow also, and vice versa. Similar way, Salesforce functions can be invoked from web components by using the Aura enabled Apex methods. So this is the workflow of how we will be developing Salesforce function. So it involves 3 steps. The first step is to develop the Salesforce function. So using any of the programming language like JavaScript, Java, or TypeScript, we can develop the Salesforce function. Once we successfully develop the function, we have to deploy the function in our Salesforce infrastructure. After successful deployment of the function, we have an option to invoke the function from any one of the Apex methods, and that execution takes place in our sandbox or production org. So this is the infrastructure, how the Salesforce function, all the files related with that function will be residing. So for creating a Salesforce function, we will be making use of SFDX commands. So we will be creating a SFDS project, and within the project, we'll be having a directory known as functions. So this functions directory acts as a root directory for all the functions which we create. Within the functions root directory, we'll be having a directory with the name as the function name in which we are creating a function. For example, if suppose I'm trying to create a function with the name as function demo, then within the functions directory, function demo will be the subdirectory, and within the function demo, all the files related with the functions will be placed. That is package.json file, index.js file, likewise. So this file structure, the base structure of functions directory and the directory created with the function name remains same for any of the language which we choose, but the files within the directory, that is index.js or package.json file, will be based upon the language which we choose. So only supported languages are JavaScript, TypeScript, and Java. At the time of creating a function, we have an option to choose which language we would like to prefer to create the function by passing it as an argument. Next slide, please. Over to Kannika. Thank you.
Thank you, Sindhu. Hi everyone. Here we listed out prerequisites which is common for both Java and JavaScript. We have a demo on Java and JavaScript alone. So first one is Salesforce CLI. It should be installed in your system. The version should be 7.121 or later. So Visual Studio, we need Visual Studio. Then in Visual Studio, we should have CLI extension pack, which is used for both JavaScript and Java. SF version should be 1.19 or later. So if you want to do it inside the production art, you can go with. Otherwise, when you do some examples, you can go with the scratch art or your developer edition, anything fine. So these are the prerequisites which is based on the languages. The first thing is JavaScript. For JavaScript, we should have Node.js. The version should be 14 or higher. For NPM, 6.13.4, the version should be and it might be higher. So NPM extension pack, we should be installed in the VS Code. For Java, we should have a JDK. The version should be 8 or higher. For Apache Maven, the version should be 3.6.3 or higher. If you have already you have JDK in your system, you no need to download the extension pack for Java in VS Code. If you don't have a JDK, you can go with extension pack for Java in Visual Studio. It will ask you to download for JDK, the version which is higher available. So you can install it through Visual Studio also. So once you're done with all the prerequisites for both Java and JavaScript, here we listed out the commands for version checking. So for Salesforce CLI, you can go with sfdx space -- version. For SF space version. For npm space -- version. For node.js, node space -- version. For JDK, Java space -- version. For Maven, it should be mvn space -- version. Otherwise, B, anything fine. Before you are going to show the demo, here we listed out the steps which we are going to do to achieve a Salesforce function. So whoever familiar with the Visual Studio, they all know that first we need to create a new project. That we should go with Control-Shift-T when it will open command palette. So there you need to give a sfdx create new project command. So once it's done, you should authorize your art, whether it is a production art or developer edition. It will ask you to authorize your art. So once you given a username, password, it will successfully authorized. So here we are entering into the function steps. First step is create function. We need to create a function with lowercase letters by giving your function name. So once you give a function command in command palette, it will ask you to choose Java language. So it might be Java, JavaScript, and TypeScript. Whatever you want, you can choose. Otherwise, in command terminal, you can give sf space generate space function name space the language which you are going to do. So once you have done with your function, you should locate the folder in the terminal. So the functions, and inside the functions folder, you will be having your function folder. So you need to locate that. Once you locate that, you need to open two terminal. One is to start your function, and one more is to run your function. For running the function, there are three options. If your function doesn't have any input parameter, you can go with the empty by passing empty parenthesis in the run function command. Otherwise, you have to give an input parameter with the keyword. Otherwise, you can go with a JSON file which is having all input parameters of your function. So I will explain everything in the demo detail. Hope you are seeing my screen, Visual Studio screen. First, we need to create a project. You need to locate your local folder. So once you created with the project, we all know that what are the folders will be created under this force app scripts, everything, a package.json, everything. So once it's done, you need to authorize your org. So it will ask you to log into the Salesforce. Once you have given username, password, can be back to the Salesforce, VS Code. So once it's successfully done, we will enter into the functions steps. So first we need to create a function. So the function name should be small letters, lowercase letters. So here it is asking you to choose a language. First I'm going to show demo on JavaScript. So once the folders are created as Sindhu set, inside the function folder, you will see the function which you created. So function demo. So there are test module, test node modules, package.json, package log.json, project TOML, all files will be created. So inside your folder, you will be seeing index.js. This is the JavaScript file you are going to change. So they have given some sample code. Here, I will explain in detail. Here it is event. Event is nothing but the occurrence of the particular in terminal. You are going to run some command with the input parameters. That particular parameter will be captured inside the event. So the context is like a session variable in the Google. So whatever you are passing inside the function, it will be stored in the context variable, session variable, and it will create a connection between function and your Salesforce org, the org which you logged in, signed in. So logger as a system.debug, logger will be handling all the logs in the different levels. Here, what the sample code do is it is selecting the ID name from the account object. The account object means inside your org, the account object, whatever ID and names are available, it should be queried. So here they have given context. So as I already mentioned, this like a session variable. Or the org which you logged in. Data API. What is data API means that it is like a client to interact with the data in the Salesforce org. What it will do, the data API will be having all the data which is returning from the query. So once they are stored in the results, we are just returning back to the return the results to from the function. So it doesn't have any input parameter, so we are not going to pass anything. In terminal, what we need to do in the next step is you need to locate your folder. So function. Inside the function demo, first, as I said, you need to start your function. In initial, it will take some time. So what it will do, it will check for the host which is free. So once it's get the host free host, it will automatically run on that particular local host. Here it is running on the 9229 local host. So you need to create a different terminal to start your function. Again, you need to locate your folder. So here we are just passing the empty parameters. The function doesn't have any input parameter. So just we are passing the empty parameter. It will run on the 8080 host. So it is returning whatever account ID and name are account details are available inside the R. It is returning everything. So it is total size is 30. So in logger we printed all the results. So you can see the logger information inside the we started function in the one terminal, right? So in the terminal you can see all the logger details. So now I want to change the query, means change the function. Here I'm typing some limit 5. But what we usually do in Apex or Java, we will save. We will again debug and run the function, right? So I'm going to start a function again. So run a function again. So the start function is running on the different terminal. Here I'm running the run function. So but what it should return? It should return 5 records, but it is returning 13. So the older session is not completed. So we need to break that session. That is what the event and the context is doing. So here we need to break the session first by clicking Control C. We can do it. We need to break the session. So once it's session breakdown, this context will be reinitiated from the first, and it will take the new input parameter as this event. So again, I'm going to start the function. So once it's started, again I'm going to run the function. You can see only 5 records has been written from the function. So this is what we need to do in all JavaScript or TypeScript. In Java or JavaScript or TypeScript, we need to do the same step for everything. So again, I will show demo on Java. So once we created a function in the Java, the folders will be different from JavaScript. So what? It will create a Maven files and target files as well as. So in example folder, it will create 4 Java classes. So first one is account and function input. The account will be having all getter setter methods, and function input will be having the input parameters, and output will be having output. So here Java function demo, this is the main function class we will be having to access the function. So here the same whatever we see in the JavaScript example, same select ID name from the account. So again we will see how it is running. You need to locate the folder. So cd functions, cd Java function demo. I'm going to start same methods. So it started the JDK here. So here one more function is running. So I'm just breaking it. So once it's done, I'm running the function from here. What it should return? It should return 13 records from the arc. So you can see 13 records has been returned from the arc. So as ID name, it has been written by. So as I said in the JavaScript, whenever you are changing the code, you need to break the particular function, and you need to start the new session variable for every changes. Here I'm going to show an example to how to pass a JSON file in the parameter, so that it will be having the key parameters if input parameters have any, if the function is having any input parameter. What you need to do, you need to create one file. I'm giving payload dot. So I'm giving limit by passing here in the JSON file. So what I'm going to do, I'm changing the, here what is happening, that we are changing the code. So again we need to break the connection. starting from first. Here I change the code according to the input parameters, what it is having. So the event is having the parameter which I pass now. So the data will be stored in the payload. So from the payload, we need to access. Here we give data limit. So here I'm giving payload.data.limit. So the limit will be passing here and the query will be returned. The limit we gave us 5. So 5 records will be returned here. I saved it. Starting the function. We need to locate the folder. So we need to pass the JSON file. So here I'm giving at payload.json. Payload.json is an input file, JSON file. We gave 5 in the code, so it is returning 5 records. This is how we need to pass a parameter, input parameter to the function. Or if you have more number of parameters, you can give it in the JSON file and you can pass that JSON file as an input parameter to that particular function. So we all have the questions how we are going to invoke the function from the Apex. We don't have a demo for that. So just we are explaining how we will do. So here the syntax is functions dot function space the function for every access we need to create a function object equal to so functions dot function dot get. The my function object is the project folder dot my function is my function name. So here we are just getting the function access from the particular function. So next we are going to invoke. So what we need to do, so function invocation, same that particular object name we need to use dot invoke. Here I'm passing a parameter as name and my account. Like I pass the parameter, you can pass the JSON file or you can directly pass the input parameter from here. As we all know, we can get the responses from get response method. Passing over to Sindhu for best practices. Thank you.
So, in general, we will be following best practices for Apex methods. Similar way for Salesforce functions also, Salesforce recommends few best practices to be followed. So, among those, the first one is use recommended error handling techniques. So as how we have for our Apex methods, we will be handling the exceptions using try-catch blocks, right? Similar way, it is always a good practice to have a proper error handling techniques using try-catch block in Salesforce functions also. So that we will be aware about the exceptions, and we can handle the exceptions in a proper manner and we can avoid the runtime errors. So that is the reason Salesforce recommends to have a proper error handling techniques as a best practice. So next is to manage transactions in function. So functions generally run outside the Apex transaction. So this is one of the main advantage which when we go for Salesforce functions instead of Apex functions. So all the Salesforce functions will be running outside the Apex transactions. So whatever the data change which we make in our Salesforce function will not be automatically tracked in our Apex transaction. And in Apex transaction, we have a default functionality of rollback plan, right? So if there is any transactional failure, all the DML which we perform will be rolled back. Whereas such mechanisms is not available in Salesforce functions. So we should be aware of this and we have to manage the transactions by ourselves. So next one is to make use of the higher compute limits. So as I have mentioned earlier, all the Salesforce functions will be running outside the Apex transactions. So the general governor limits applicable for Apex transaction is not applicable for Salesforce functions. So we have a greater advantage of using higher limits. We have higher limits when we go with the Salesforce functions. So Salesforce recommends to make use of this advantage. So make use of this higher computing limits by utilizing the Salesforce functions. Next is avoid excessive data API calls. So currently, all the API requests from the functions are counted against the maximum API requests given for an org. So in general, we should be very careful of making the API calls. We should not make excessive data API calls so that it will be affecting our function execution, and it will also be counted against the overall API limit which we have for our org. For instance, now all orgs using functions have a limit of 235,000 API requests per day for a particular org. So we can make use of this in an effective manner by avoiding the excessive API calls. So next is to understand the memory process. So for instance, for both synchronous as well as asynchronous process, we have an upper limit of 1 GB of process memory for each function container. So how the Salesforce handles this is it automatically increases or decreases the number of function containers based upon the CPU load. So for each function container, a particular function container can handle multiple concurrent invocations simultaneously. So at this point of time, we may face memory errors. So to handle those memory errors, Salesforce gives some practices to be followed. Like we should keep our functions as simple as possible. It makes that a function will be invoked and executed within a small memory. Next is we should focus on a specific task. So for each function, we should focus on a specific primary task instead of making it more complex. And one more important thing is we have to test the functions in our dev environment with the loads which we will be expecting in our prod environment. So before moving to production, we have to test our functions in our lower instances with the load which we expect in our prod. So by this manner, we will be avoiding our memory errors. Next is we should not rely on the function state. So in general, Salesforce functions run in stateless model. So the functions can't rely on the information whichever is generated in our previous run. So we should not make any assumption about the system catch or runtime invocations. So instead of relying on the function state, we should not rely on the function state and we should be very careful. So the runtime of a particular function is not guaranteed to be same for each and every invocation, since it works in a stateless model. So in this process, we have to also understand the sharing state across these invocations. So it's possible to share the state across each function invocation using global variables and temporary file names. But as a best practice, we should not use global variables by default. And also, we should not use a static name for a function file or folder by default. So we, as a best practice, we can follow a mechanism of generating random file or folder names so that multiple invocations of a same function will not override each other at the time of execution. So these are all few best practices which we have to keep in mind while we are creating and invoking Salesforce functions. In general, so functions, Salesforce functions give a greater advantage of making use of the programming language, which we will be more familiar with, like Java or JavaScript, instead of sticking to Apex standards. And another one great advantage is we have extended limits instead of, it is not bounded with the standard Apex transaction governor limits. We have upper limits. So Salesforce functions can be used to compute heavy tasks, and it will be processed in a more efficient manner than our Apex methods. Next slide, please. So now we are open up for the question. After Q&A session, we will be having this session. Thank you, team.
Team, do you have any queries? Just feel free to ask.
Yeah, hi, this is Parantaman here.
Yes.
So thank you so much for this terrific session. Like I had been seeing this function for maybe like last 1 year, but no one had clearly explained it to this much basic level. So thank you to both of you. So my doubt is like, do you have any use cases like where this function is used, or like do you have any scenarios where your client suggested to go with functions?
Currently, now as we are exploring it, we don't have any use case in specific or client use cases or requirements in specific to use functions. But as we gone through the best Salesforce documentations, so whenever there is a complex task to be performed, or in specific, whenever we have a reusable case, like same function has to be reused in both flow, web component, or a component likewise. So for these reusable scenarios, we can go with Salesforce functions.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Benazir. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah, so I have a question like, so you are saying that we can use this function in Apex class, right? So can we use the same function, this invocation in other JavaScript in LWC component, we have a JS file, right? Can we use that, or can we invoke this function in another JS file? Is it possible?
Currently from web components, we cannot invoke the functions directly. So we have to rely on Apex methods only. So point of contact for Salesforce functions and other components like web component or flow or Aura component, only point of contact is Apex methods. So using Apex methods only, we can invoke Salesforce functions.
Okay, so in the demo you are showing like using a query, like, so apart from query, can we do any other calculations like iterating that query results, those kind of things we can do in that function?
Yeah, exactly.
Fine. So I'll be sharing all the simple prompts demo and state demo and be sharing this with you. This is very important that going forward developing applications.
Yeah, so one more quick question, please. Like, you are passing a parameter as a JSON, right, in the Salesforce function. So is it mandatory to pass the JSON only, or we can pass any string variables or anything like?
Yeah, you can pass it. Just we are creating a JSON file as we are all aware of it. It's just an example. So you can put parameters in directly also.
Okay, the parameter should not strict with any data types, right? Like it should be a string or a number in that way, not right?
No, it's all depends on your input parameter type. So whatever kind, so for example, if you want to use an integer thing, you have to use that kind of data type. So it is all based on your function.
Okay, thank you.
Team, any other question? Anything need to discuss here? I think all are good. Okay, then we can move on to quiz session. Team, let me share my screen. We are going to use Kahoot here. Your team, is it visible, right? So you can able to see the questions in our Zoom screen, and you just log into the Kahoot.it. You just enter this game pin, then you can able to get in. Okay, around 8 people. Kiruba, Sachin, Vijay, Mageshwari, Ketan. I think Ketan is a regular attendees. Rutika, Pooja, Jagdeep, Gomati, Raja. Yes, I think around 20 people. 21. Selva. Suresh. Sindhuja. I think I am seeing around 30 plus in Zoom, only 23 in our Kahoot board. Team, anyone facing any issue to get into Kahoot? Muhammad, Kiran, Branta. I think around 26 people. I think we can get started. So far around 26 people in Kahoot. I am repeating again, you can able to see the questions in Zoom screen. Then in your device, you can able to enter the answers. It may be a multiple choice or true or false. We have around 15 set of questions based on our today's session. So winner will receive the certification or voucher. I mean, first place. Let me start. I think Paranam in first place. I think last question.